Okay. Okay. This is a lecture on discipline and character in the market revolution. We're going to be talking about time, work, rhythm, and the factory system in this lecture. We're going to talk about clocks and the effect they have. The fact is that the first generation of industrial workers were taught to obey a clock. And so that ran up against a more traditional style of work that was imbibed alcohol while they worked. So we'll talk about that. And so temperance and the abuse of alcohol became the leading reform issue of the day. Okay. I suppose the first thing to say about clocks and watches is that time becomes a commodity. You spend time rather than passing time as it had been previously. So your work rhythms have been ruled by the seasons and by the calendar. Farmers, for instance, worked very hard during spring planting and fall harvest, but less hard other weeks of the year. So the rhythms of the year affected how hard you worked. Clocks were very rare in American history. Clocks had been invented probably in the 1200s in many cities in medieval Europe, but they were not commonly used in the American experience. Clocks were rare, they were inaccurate, watches even more so. So it was very rare to have a real strong sense of when things were happening. Time zones were invented. Well, they were agreed to in 1884 because railroads needed to know exactly what time it was, so that high noon is when the sun was directly above you. So you had high noon in Watsonville a minute or so before high noon in Santa Cruz. That telegraph wires told people the exact time, and so they could tell for themselves that high noon was different in different places. So you had this notion of clocks and watches, which bled into the Rhode Island system of employing entire families to do the work of a factory, or the Waltham or Lowell system, which employed farm girls to live in dormitories and work at the company town there, the factory in the company town. So they were taught to obey a clock, this first generation of workers in the Lowell or Rhode Island system of labor. Employers are going to come to want people who are punctual, who are frugal, so you can pay them practically nothing and they can still come back for more, for disciplined, for sober workers. All of this was a part of the character formation that they felt was necessary in employees. So if a worker was punctual, frugal, disciplined, and sober. He was just right for the managers of the time. All this bucked up against a traditional notion of work, where Americans had drunk a lot of alcohol in the 1830s. This chart that you show here shows that per capita alcohol consumption peaks in 1830 and then has a precipitous drop. I mentioned the temperance, the idea of tempering, of mellowing, of refusing to imbibe in alcohol became the largest reform movement of the day, and it remained so until it achieved national prohibition in the 1920s. But prior to that, America was a nation of sots, of people that drank alcohol because there was so much of it lying around. John Adams started each day with 2 tankards of hard cider. John Marshall drank while the court was in session. Rural laborers were paid half their wages in alcohol. There was a rum ration in the US Navy. Alcohol was plentiful and cheap. There was a lot of extra grain and fruit lying around, and so they fermented it into alcohol. Ben Franklin had a great line. He said, if God had wanted man to drink water, he wouldn't have given him an elbow capable of raising a wine glass. And it was that attitude which kind of led to a nation of sots, of drinkers all the time, at work, at play, everywhere. But it declined rapidly as employers began to move away from drinking while on the job and wanting workers who were disciplined and sober. And so the move to abstinence and temperance, and finally prohibition, where you make alcohol consumption illegal. It's all based on the notion that character is flexible. Alcohol abuse remains a crucial problem today. Many of you come from families, no offense, that were impacted by alcohol abuse. Certainly I do. And so the notion that you can choose not to drink, that character is flexible, that you can choose to be a better person, is part of this tradition of giving up alcohol, of taking the teetotaler pledge. So America got involved in the temperance movement in a big way, and this contributed to an emerging new kind of worker that would come to the fore during the market revolution. Okay, I think that's it. Thank you very much.